listening to the Chain Reaction Podcast. What's going on, y'all? I'm Jeremiah, and I am here with a person with a wonderful name. How's it going, man?
Hey, it's going all right. Jeremiah Harding here. Insanity is free on Twitter. Just fresh off of the debate and several little rants in an article.
You're plugging your Twitter right up front there. Really getting after it. Yeah.
Merciless self-promotion.
It's one of your pride and joys. How's it going, man? How you feeling? How's Christmas? How's life?
It was really good. Beer helped, and so did a family that was reasonably civil. And lots of caffeine.
Reasonably civil. Do you have a pretty low bar for what that means?
Okay, well, I mean, so there's a thing like, you know, you try not to discuss religion and politics, but I do anyway because I'm an asshole. And so they were reasonably civil with the way that I interact. And, you know, sometimes they aren't. So it was very, very good. Like Thanksgiving, Christmas, I had, you know, 2 get-togethers with separate sides of the family that separated when I was like 7, 8.
Gotcha.
And but everybody was reasonably civil, and it was very good.
Nice. That's great. What was your beer of choice, or did you just drink whatever was there?
I drank what was there, which was Natural Light.
Oh no! Oh no! That doesn't make things better.
Well, it's what my grandma likes, and one of the things that smooths
that's
things
because her
she has
taste buds are dead.
with. Yes.
Okay. I'm glad we agree on that at least.
Yeah, I mean, for me, my booze of choice is always going to be Bacardi 151. Like, just throw it down and like enjoy the buzz like immediately. That's my bag. Okay.
Yeah, I'm more into sipping bourbon with a splash of cool water in it to separate the oils from the rest of it. I don't know. I drink kind of douchey usually. Although, yeah, I'll drink cheap beer every once in a while. And cheap wine. I like cheap wine as much as expensive wine, for sure. You started out with what?
I started out with cheap beer with like beer pong. So I mean, my relationship with cheap beer is it's available, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess if you get used to it early. I started with craft, so you end up getting real spoiled. So you had a debate recently that I watched half of intermittently. I haven't gotten around to watching the whole thing yet. Would you care to tell us about it?
Okay, so, like, basically, Justin Moldau, who runs the Liberty Hangout Twitter, and I had a series of disagreements to be reasonably civil about it. And what our series of disagreements were basically predicated on the idea of anarchist borders in an anarchist society, or borders to get to an anarchist society. And I think that borders are a statist artifact and should be thrown away with the rest of the state. But he thinks that borders should be maintained and, in fact, right now strengthened so that we can prevent,
right.
the scourge of invading communists from voting our rights away. And that's silly, because our rights will be voted away by whatever the banksters' interests in the Bilderberg group want them to be. You know, there's no control. We can't stop it by ticking a box on a thing. Oh, I'm involved. I don't care. You're not. You didn't help. But, you know, beyond the normal anarchist silly voting arguments, there's the argument that, like, while we have, quote, closed borders, there's a huge influx of immigrants. Why? Because they can go around it, and because those that don't are imported here from places the U.S. government fucked up. So, like, yeah, let's fix the problem by encouraging the state to increase its border strength, and by encouraging borders around all property instead of just normal property defense like you would use for any invader. Like, yeah, that's beneficial.
Right.
So I argued with them, sort of, but mostly I laughed while they interrupted me. It was fun.
Yeah. What would you say was their best argument for government increasing borders?
Well, okay, so their best argument wasn't necessarily for that. Their best argument operated on the unlimited secession idea, where if you can secede from like the Union, then you can secede from a state that seceded from the Union, and you can secede from a county, from a municipality, from a block, from from an apartment complex to your room.
Right.
You can be personally seceded, and that's a libertarian argument. I would say, though, that it's not an anarchist argument, because essentially, what we get is a bunch of really small federalized states that, gee, what are they going to do? Well, we want to go across all of these other territories. How do we do that? We make agreements. Well, gee, states making agreements with each other to have mutual operation terms. That's never been done before. Wait, isn't that what we're doing now?
Right. It seems to me, while I like the idea of secession, obviously, of individual secession, of everyone governing themselves, not having any rulers. It seems to me like you're saying you're just changing where the centralized power is located. Instead of being in Washington, D.C. for California or whatever, it's located, somewhere in California. I don't even know where. Sacramento. There you go. Located there, and you just have a different hub of people who are not any more interested in caring for or in respecting the rights of the individual than the federal government is as a whole now. Maybe even less interested. And it's possible. Like
Cal exit.
Cal exit. I do like the idea of states seceding, mostly because it's disruptive and it's an indicator of people being frustrated with the current status quo, which sucks ass. What do you think is the best? What's like? I don't know. Give me your top two anarchist arguments against borders.
Okay,
government enforced borders.
The first idea is that, like, from my perspective as an anarchist, which has often since the debate been called the only anarchist perspective presented, my perspective is that borders have always been and will always be interstitial areas between states, designed to embrace state agreements of ingress and egress and extradition, and basically they're there to pacify governments. They're not there to and to control citizens. They're not there to protect us from the communists, which, by the way, is laughable, because as soon as you have one communist in government, it has the potential to be a communist government. So, it's like, yes, we'll prevent communists from voting, but you know what? The ones that are here and in the White House, we can't do anything about those. So, the second argument I guess would be that when you encourage borders, you're encouraging people to have no accountability for their own personal property. You're encouraging them to not defend it, not set up networks. You're encouraging them to just rely on the existence of a big beautiful wall somewhere, like, that keeps all the nasties out, and you ignore the nasties within, and you ignore your responsibility for protecting yourself from those nasties. Like, nobody else should have to protect you. That's your job, right? Like, that's easy.
Yeah, it's a really narrow-minded and just limited way of viewing the world and people from other nations as well. Like, they can have a lot of value that they can bring to others in the U.S. in the same way that people from the U.S. have value that they could bring to Mexico. Let's be honest, we're talking about Mexico. I mean, no one in the U.S. is talking about building a border between here and Canada, although Canada might start on construction soon. We'll see how they feel about Trump after a couple of years.
They'll feel fine. He's been decided in advance.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I think that he will go along with what the powers that be want. Whether or not he's been decided in advance, I'm not so sure. If he gets assassinated soon, I believe he will he will not have been decided in advance. Well, that's not conclusive, but it's strong evidence. Unless he fakes his own assassination.
Yeah, why not?
He loves the limelight too much. But the reason... He
can find it somewhere else, couldn't
he? Then that faking of assassination wouldn't be very effective if he's in the limelight somewhere else. Just the way the media and the government right now, most aspects of it, most intelligence communities and the executive branch are handling this Russia situation, makes me think that they weren't really super stoked about Trump in terms of his seeming desire to not want to start a war with Russia or increase tensions. It looks like, from my perspective, that they are deliberately trying to increase tensions with Russia as fast as possible. They're going triple time on this because Trump is the one who will be in office in 20 days and not Hillary. What do you think?
Because I don't know if you remember, but there are videos for Obama and Bush's campaign promises, and those videos that are up show how they made a promise and then immediately, as soon as they got in, didn't keep them. And so historically, we've gotten very used to lying politicians lying their way into their positions, right? So if that's the case, then I don't see why Trump could be an exception. Obama was going to pull everyone out of Iraq immediately, and it took Bush's status of forces agreement and elbow twisting from the prime minister to get him to pull the troops out, threatening to expose war crimes. It's
right.
And so Obama is the most modern example, but most presidents in history have not kept their promises because their promises are the spoonful of sugar that helps the statism go down. Their promises are there to say, hey, you know what? I won't go to war with Russia. This other person wants to go to war with Russia. Well, what if they both want to go with Russia and, it's a reality show?
Yeah, I'm definitely open to... I definitely believe that Trump will not follow through on the vast majority of his promises. But the biggest reason why I think he might on this one is the way that the powers that be are responding right now, immediately, who seem to want to rush this. Truth be damned, it's amazing. It's so funny the way a week after people started talking about fake news as if that was a thing, all the other major mainstream news media wasn't forced to, but they ended up spouting a lot of fake news themselves and completely news without evidence, especially regarding Russia and the election hacking. But Aleppo was a huge one too, which is also Russia related. They just make themselves look like fools all the time. And it feels like all the capital and goodwill that they've built up over time with people for doing some reporting of the truth is disintegrating quickly, and hopefully will be absent in the next few years until they start making changes, if they actually do.
Well, hopefully, sure, but to me, I've looked into specifically the main conspiracy theory that I've been into for the past maybe 4 or 5 years is the Bilderberg Group. Okay. And if you look into the Bilderberg Group, you find for instance, this chart that I'm trying to find in my computer here. This chart shows the Bilderberg Group's political connections, and it proves that if you go into the actual content of the chart and verify, which I did, that all of these connections, all of these media and government connections, they're all connected to the same central group of people which meet once a year to decide how things are run. And to me, that shows that you can't trust anything you see from these people. These people aren't on our side. Even Trump, like, there's no way.
No, he's not on his side.
There's no way he could form all of the connections he has professionally and politically if he was going to go against all of them immediately. He already agreed to do certain things in exchange for certain amounts of publicity. I mean, his business is booming. He's got people asking for deals. He's got a ton of support coming in from international conglomerates who want to prevent a war. Those who don't have a seat at the Bilderberg group table having dumped a huge amount of support into his businesses. Like, it's insane to think that that this man is not made some sort of agreement to toe the line in exchange for the presidency. I mean, that's what Hillary was going to do, theoretically, and I don't see Hillary hating herself much now that she's out. I see her relaxing and retiring and going for long walks in the woods. That sounds nice. That doesn't sound terrible.
Maybe, if she's capable of walking still. She looked like maybe she was running out of health for a while there. I can't imagine living like one of those people, which is a funny thing to say. I mean, one of those ruling class for life type individuals, especially Hillary. You could name other people like that, but man, Soros. I mean, she stuck with her husband through multiple affairs, through multiple rape accusations, through, settling with women, because of these rape allegations. And she just stuck through, hoping that she would come into power at some point.
Well, and keeping in mind, though, like, maybe the fact that the Lewinsky scandal occurred so close to a controversial series of cruise missile strikes, maybe that's more distraction. Maybe instead of focusing on the cocksucking, we should be focusing on the fact that he bombed a pharmaceutical factory, resulting in like 30,000 Sudanese deaths. America, fuck yeah!
I mean, why do we care about the Sudanese, man?
Well, exactly.
He did it with a U.S. flag, so it's not a big deal. Yeah. I think the timing of that could definitely be, deliberate, but there's still the actions of that and all the exposure of that. For some reason, it started showing the cursor of my mouse on your face. Distracted me. I will hopefully not do that in the future, YouTube. Yeah, and I mean, there's always timing things like that are interesting, and I doubt it's the timing of the events usually. I'm sure it is sometimes, but it's usually what the media chooses to focus on and make the main news story and make the thing where you bring in experts to discuss it all the time and really build up these minor things and take attention away from things that really matter, like bombing places. I mean, people sometimes forget, just talking about the Clinton administration, that dude bombed Iraq periodically for 8 years straight. I mean, complaining about, or not complaining, but there's still this tendency in people to think that U.S. relations with the Middle East started on September 11th, 2001, when in fact it goes back a much longer distance, and the U.S. is not innocent. They're certainly as guilty as any terrorist.
Well, not to seem more like a terrorist than I already do, but, people should listen to bin Laden. People should listen to bin Laden. His reasons he gave were that he saw, Arabs dying at the hands of Jews.
Yes, absolutely. You should listen to bin Laden, not to be like, oh, this guy, what a great guy, we should learn from him, but to actually understand what it is that drives people to engage in suicidal behavior, to lash out at another group of people. Like, what is it that causes people to do that? It's not their crazy religion. If you look at how he got people to sign up for Al-Qaeda, it wasn't by talking about Allah. Certainly that was used in conjunction as a motivating factor, another one. But if you kill 500,000 children in Iraq because of a blockade and sanctions, guess what? That's a really good marketing tool for terrorism. So just like having 30,000 troops in Saudi Arabia, continually bombing, various nations and interfering and installing puppet dictators, that will piss off people in a region.
Well, yeah, and not to mention that, but like the CIA taught the Mujahideen how to produce IEDs. They radicalized them. They sent them weapons, and then they sent their asset, Bin Laden, over there, and no, they're not responsible for 9/11.
Right.
It's all their crazy religion, and they hate us for our freedom. It's not about at all the CIA connection. It's not about the fact that the global war on terror began with things like the Soviet Afghan conflict or Desert Storm. None of that. Just brush it under the rug. They flew planes into buildings.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a funny circle of people not learning with, like you said, funding and arming the Mujahideen to attack Russia, which included and later became Al-Qaeda and members, of various jihadist groups in the region that wanted to also attack the other empire in the area, which was the United States. And then they bombed the Twin Towers, and now, it was just 10 years after that, in 2011, when they started, when at least news reports were first coming out about how they started arming and, I don't know about funding. I think there was some, but mostly providing arms to Al-Qaeda groups.
Oh, funding.
In Libya and Syria. Yeah, I thought a lot of the funding came more from Qatar and Saudi Arabia, but indirect arms is indirect funding, and so is training, which is what they were doing. So,
well, and not to mention that, but like the funny thing about international politics is that the more you study it, the more you find out how little they respect their own rules. Every president could possibly be considered a money launderer since the Federal Reserve Act was put in, and every president should be considered a tyrant since the Whiskey Rebellion. So the U.S. government has always been fucked, but they didn't want to talk about this because it's politically incorrect, and you teach your children that, they'll respect authority less. So if you really want to look into it, the U.S. government's been funneling money to the region for a very long time, because without that, there would be no lithium, opium, or petroleum coming to the U.S. government, and they couldn't siphon off a huge amount of their money getting it imported for any other reason. Like, they have to pump their money back out to the global economy because everybody knows it's worthless. They have to pump it out. And so instead of making valuable money, instead of operating on fiat currency, instead of solving the problem, instead of making things better, they've made it their business to make their money valuable again by saying, hey, you know what, OPEC, we'll only trade oil in dollars, and while we're over there, we'll protect your opium fields from invaders, and we'll guard your lithium fields in exchange for a cut, and that cut is usually a huge percentage of the overall yield. And then, what else? Oh, well, there's a huge debt to China. So China's really local to the region, so it will provide regional stability and a constant flow of supplies and resources to China so that they don't lop our heads off for having the government that promised the world and couldn't deliver an acre of land. The motherfuckers are traitors, and nobody realizes it because it sucks to hear.
Yeah, it does suck to hear. And the crazy part is, we're talking about a huge, complex web of money, of currencies, of manipulation, of money printing, of money going into hands of military industrial complex, of money being just tossed in the forms of bombs, and money just destroyed in terms of economic destruction. We're talking about Iraq, Libya, Syria, who all were looking to go to a gold standard, and then you have wars and rebels in there. And this is just one aspect of government intervention. This is just one single area that is just hugely corrupt and destructive to humanity and to the well-being of others and to all the money and resources that people already have. And it's a huge waste of time and energy that really does have the potential to ruin the world. And it's one of those things that will blow up at various times. Maybe the final explosion will be more of a whimper, but there will be a lot of blowing up events in between, including things like the devaluation of the currency, of the increase in the price of oil, which goes along with that, but is also independent in terms of the violence in the region, and things like terrorist attacks. And government does this sort of destruction and this disgusting treatment of humanity in every single area in which they intervene. In every single area where they exercise power, they ruin shit. It sucks.
Yeah, and that's the fun part, because then they go on all these green initiative like horse shit, like fucking circle jerk sessions where they cry about the effects on the environment in front of cameras, and then behind the cameras, behind closed doors, they're making more deals to get more shit that they can burn instead of finding sustainable solutions. We're not talking about switching to lithium. Lithium isn't the new OPEC. They know how limited a supply of lithium we really have. What they're still doing is trying to find new and better ways to get us to consume what they want us to consume, so that they can still call us tax cattle and make their global business and government interests happy. That's why I don't believe for a second Trump is on any team but theirs, because realistically, there's no way out of this mess that doesn't involve a total either peaceful or non-peaceful to say the least, and the most legal thing I can say on air, revolution. There's only one way out, and that's keeping up with runaway inflation. That's constantly pumping out more and more shit. That's cashless society, so that they can pump numbers into computers instead of pump bills into us.
Yeah.
It's absurd. Nobody realizes it, but everybody's being played, and I'm being played to some extent, because there's some part of my paradigm that's wrong. I guarantee it. But I'll find it and I'll try and root it out. Most people won't do that. It's very, very uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are many elements of our paradigm that we'll never find, because there's knowledge out there we can't know, and what we'll never actually have access to, but you can at least be open to it. And like you said earlier, it does suck to acknowledge how you're being treated and how your government actually functions, and the way they are actually making life worse for everyone, including you. And it's all about them maintaining power. I understand why people don't want to admit that, but you can become kind of an asshole when you don't, because you end up supporting this evil being done to others, which is it's fine if you want to support it being done to you. I think that's really unhealthy and stupid. But when you want them to exist, you want them to do it to your fellow man, which is sick.
That's the real fun. That's where the real fun starts, because people don't realize, it's a video I'm about to do actually. Government is a package deal. When you vote for your welfare reform, so that you can get a huge amount more WIC or SNAP or something like that. When you vote for better roads in your community. When you vote for better military spending. when you vote for any of these things, they all come with one another because they're all going to happen whether you vote or not. People need those things in order to keep the government functioning the way it does, managing a bunch of tax cattle and debt slaves. So that stuff is going to happen whether you vote for it or not. But if you vote for it, you're essentially saying, yeah, you know what? Bomb that brown kid overseas as long as I get mine.
Yeah. Yep. Patriotism, nationalism, all these forms of collectivism, which put America first, even if it means the deaths of innocents elsewhere. It's sick.
Libertarians are selfish.
Right. This group of people that is against aggressive violence on other people, yeah, they're so self-centered. Oh, these asswipes think that they should keep their own property instead of having it taken from them. It's a crazy thing where theft becomes an act of selflessness. At least the left seems to frame it that way sometimes, where taking people's money by force or having the state do it for you because you don't have the courage to do it yourself is somehow just a part of being a decent human being.
Well, hey, I mean, realistically, that is the selflessness. They have no self to give.
Yeah, the lack of self. I don't know what that's called, the giving of others. All right, well, that's where we got from starting to talk about Jeremiah's debate on borders. Welcome to a conversation between anarchists. It's easy to progress from one point to another, I guess.
Popcorn.
Or
Rockstar.
Popcorn, indeed. Yeah, you just end up passionate about all these things because you care about people and what happens to them, and you care about justice and ethics, and all the dead for no reason, and all the economic destruction for no fucking reason. You end up having all these people in poverty. Why? Because some people from the Bilderberg group, some of the rich of the world wanted it to be so.
Yeah, if you want to play a clip next time I'm on, I'll put a link in for Endgame, Blueprint for Global Enslavement. It's a documentary I recommend to literally anyone starting on libertarianism.
All right, I'll if you want to send me a link at some point, I'll check it out and see.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to talk about today is praxeology, which is an economic term used by the Austrians. And praxeology, praxis is Greek, which means like practice, like what you put into practice, and ology is a study of. So it's the study of the practice, the study of how humans behave and how humans act, which is, as we talked about last week, if you watched or listened to the episode, we talked about the difference between the economic means and the political means, which the economic means are voluntary human interactions, whether that is first appropriation of property or the creation of property by man's labor in his environment, or if it's by voluntarily acquiring property from others through peaceful interactions where both parties consent, as contrasted with the political means, which is the use of force or some other act of coercion to take from others. Human action and how humans go about getting what they want, how their practice of living their life is important for Austrian economics, which they're one of the only groups that actually acknowledges that and brings psychology into it. So I wanted to read a quote, which is not about praxeology specifically, but it is an analysis of human action, of human interactions, by Mises. It's a pretty short quote. It's from his book called Human Action, and he describes what are the inner motivations of man and what we can know about their action based upon what we know about the nature of humanity and through observations. He says, in colloquial speech, we call a man happy who has succeeded in attaining his ends. A more adequate description of his state would be that he is happier than he was before. There is, however, no valid objection to a usage that defines human action as the striving for happiness. But we must avoid misunderstandings. The ultimate goal of human action is always the satisfaction of the acting man's desire. There is no standard of greater or lesser satisfaction other than individual judgments of value, different for various people and for the same people at various times. What makes a man feel uneasy and less uneasy is established by him from the standard of his own will and judgment, from his personal and subjective valuation. Nobody is in a position to decree what should make a fellow man happier. So what Mises talks about is a little bit is the subjectivity of human value. The analysis of human action says that every human acts in a way that he or she believes will leave them better off, will maximize their subjective value. That doesn't mean they act in a way which will make the most profit. That doesn't mean they will act in a way which gives them, the most immediate good feelings. It means that for whatever their individual preferences and desires are, they will interact with others and act themselves to maximize those and improve those. So what this means in relation to voluntarism is that when two humans interact with one another, they will both be seeking their own well-being. And right now, I'm interacting with Jeremiah and enjoying this conversation. But if I thought that this was, or if this was not pleasurable to me in some way, if this was something I didn't value, I'd just hang up and stop recording, or I'd just record myself, which gets to be a little annoying after a while for me and the listeners. But both of us are interacting voluntarily, and we believe that we are better off in some way internally for having interacted. Maybe we value learning from each other. Maybe we just like talking to someone. Maybe we are narcissists who enjoy people watching us on YouTube. There's a lot of different reasons. But with government interferes with these interactions. So back one step. Jeremiah and I interacting is what I would call a mutually beneficial relationship. We both enter this relationship trying to benefit, and we both leave it better off than we were before. Or in likelihood, we are leaving it better off than we were before. What government does is they interfere with these interpersonal relationships. They prevent people from engaging in voluntary relationships that are mutually beneficial, and they do this in literally millions of ways, because there are literally millions of laws guiding these relationships. But one thing that's easy to talk about is wages. One thing, the government, when they set a minimum wage, what they are saying to the employer and the employee is that you two cannot interact in whatever way you choose. If the employer says, I have $5 an hour to give labor, and an employee says, I'm willing to work for $5 an hour, or that's the only job I can find, government will say, no, you can't do that. So what is the end result? The end result is that the employer is worse off because he can't hire someone for the amount of money he has available to hire. So he doesn't benefit from their labor. And the employee is worse off, or potential employee is worse off, because they can't work for their given labor for $5 an hour. Maybe they can't find a job making more than that because for whatever reason, they just aren't very hireable. So by the more relationships like that are prevented, the more worse off every individual is. When in a voluntary society, when people are free to interact with one another, what you have is this series of individual decisions where people are, by seeking their own well-being and engaging in a relationship with others, they are benefiting others and benefiting themselves. So every party that's interacting leaves better off. So the more of these relationships that happen in a society, the better off everyone in society is. A voluntarist world really prioritizes and really makes relationships amazing, because the way that you get ahead, the way that you improve your own life and make the world more the way you want it to be and satisfy your own needs and desires is by benefiting others, is by helping others do the exact same with their life, which is the exact opposite of the state, which acts violently upon others to benefit themselves. All right. Any thoughts, Jeremiah?
Well, I always thought it was, yeah. I always thought a really easy way to explain spontaneous order and human action to people was the idea that you don't need the government to tell you which box of cornflakes to pick at the store. You don't need the government to tell you which lane to choose when you drive. You don't need the government to tell you which store to go to or which school to send your kids. You don't need it, although I suppose legislation could be put into effect where that would be mandatory. But somehow people have been cowed into believing that they require government's permission for a certain minimal specific set of circumstances and not for any other, because they've been told from birth that these circumstances, roads, police, military action, welfare, environmental reforms, that those sorts of things require a mandate from a top-down hierarchical system. And the spontaneous order model suggests that the human choice to buy a specific product, the human choice to put effort and energy into one place and not another, is probably at least partially rational, and that decision should be respected as a part of a greater market web. And so if you don't need government to tell you what you want to buy at the store, you don't need the government to tell you which person to call if you need help, which road company to go with to pave your neighborhood's roads. You don't need them to tell you any of this, even though they would insist that without them you would be worthless as a citizen. You would be a freeloader. You would be a bad decision maker. Even though most other cases they don't bring any of that up. They're not. Whenever they do, we're quick to call them nanny staters. Well, we're already in a giant Orwellian police state. People just don't like talking about it. So human action states that maybe instead of focusing on what our quote graders would demand we focus on, we should allow the market to do its work and allow human action to do what it does best and create a rational market based on pricing system and reason and business cycle theory. Things that people can look into, but they don't because school tells them that they should just pay their taxes and get along.
Yeah, and just the get along part is nice if it's just getting along with others, not violating them. I mean, you don't need to be an expert in economics in order, to benefit from free market interactions. You're talking about reason and people making rational decisions. And this isn't to say that, the study of human action isn't to say that every time someone interacts with another person, they end up better off. Just that the individual is more likely to end up maximizing their own value and maximize the meeting of their own desires and making their well-being better off than a third party deciding for them. And
especially a central planner.
Especially a central planner. Yeah, the more distant probably the worse off the individuals are. And rational decisions doesn't necessarily there's very measuring whether or not someone is being rational is incredibly subjective, because you don't know what's going on inside of their mind. You don't know what's happening in their body and what they want and what they are seeking. So individuals, might make decisions that you think are irrational, but that are perfectly rational within their world, because they don't have the same desires and wants you do for their life. And that, just because you have different thoughts on how people should live, doesn't then magically give you a right to violate them in order to make them act the way that you want them to. One potential objection or explaining why this analysis of human action is wrong, I think has to do with human sacrifice, but I think it's easily explained, like where people donate, like I've donated thousands of hours of my time and money and whatever, to different organizations and to people and to helping people build homes, whatever. I don't know. It's weird talking about things I've done, but that left me a lot worse off financially and a lot worse off in terms of my free time, my leisure time, my time spent being entertained by Netflix or getting better at video games. I lost a lot of time like that. I think it's still fair to call it a sacrifice, because I did sacrifice some things, but because of what I value as an individual, doing that was worth it to me. I mean, even when, from the Christian worldview, you think about Jesus and his sacrifice on the cross, but I mean, even Scripture says that Jesus endured the cross because of the joy set before him. He was actually acting as someone who was seeking to meet and fulfill his desires, because he did so out of love for the world. That was a greater value to him than his own life in the moment. Not trying to... this podcast won't be it might be anti-religious if Jeremiah wants to talk more about it, and I'm not going to bring up Jesus every time, but I feel like he is like one of the epitomic cultural examples of sacrifice. I think even his actions are explained by praxeological Austrian analysis of human behavior.
Well, I mean, absolutely, and I'm less anti-religious when it comes to Jesus specifically, and more to his quote followers. A lot of the people involved in the religion of Christianity give his words a bad name, because he had a lot of really good things to say. And they sort of bastardize it. In fact, I'm about to start a podcast discussing some of that stuff when I can get a bit more free time. But the idea is that Jesus didn't say, this was the great thing about coming to libertarianism after having been a hardcore Christian. Jesus didn't say, forcibly redistribute the wealth of others. He said, go and give from your plenty. He wasn't a socialist. Jesus was an anarchist. He opposed man's authority and said that they were stepping on the toes of the real master. And not to mention that, but he also said that they had no place to create rules, because the rules had already been created and they were breaking most of them. So, the idea of Jesus' sacrifice, from an atheist perspective, is sort of, interesting. I'll say that.
Okay.
It was for a reason. It was for the reason that he was under the impression he would be doing it for the benefit of everyone, and that includes him. He would be doing it to create a better earth in the long run, and even though he wouldn't be there to see it. He believed he would be ascending to a place where he would be able to watch his work. And if Jesus is real and watching everything right now, then he gets to see people bastardize his work quite a lot. So I'm pretty sure that is one of those things that would, in a biblical sense, make God very angry. So, but that doesn't detract from the reasons he did it. The conclusion of a decision doesn't make the decision any different.
Right. Yeah, like you're saying, Jesus was in constant conflict with local authorities and, even eventually indirectly Rome himself. And certainly his followers afterward came into conflict with the Caesars even for hundreds of years.
Yeah, execution has a way of changing a man.
Yeah, yeah. And then you have a bunch of just Christians now as it pertains to the state. America, fuck yeah! That's was my growing up mostly. Bunch of Republican Christians, save Israel, bomb the Muslims. All right, Jeremiah, you ready? Jeremiah with the news.
All right, so I think I'll go with the Free Thought Project article on the fact that the corporate media admitted to publishing viral fake news after independent media busted them. This is available. It's an article by Claire Bernice, and it's on the freethoughtproject.com. There will be a link in the description. The article reads this way: mangling facts for the benefit of the U.S. government's anti-Russia, anti-Trump propaganda campaign. Yet again, corporate media published an article which subsequently went viral, claiming that in an interview, Julian Assange praised Donald Trump but blasted Hillary Clinton because essentially he's working for the Russians. It simply isn't true. In fact, as journalist Glenn Greenwald countered in The Intercept, The Guardian's Ben Jacobs cherry-picked specific details to create a fictionalized account of the actual La Repubblica interview with Assange in order to fit a preordained narrative favorable to the American political establishment. In short, corporate media is guilty of publishing fraudulent...
Just read the political establishment sentence again. Let's start from there.
Okay. In fact, as journalist Glenn Greenwald countered in The Intercept, The Guardian's Ben Jacobs cherry-picked specific details to create a fictionalized account of the actual La Repubblica interview with Assange in order to fit a preordained narrative favorable to the American political establishment. In short, corporate media is guilty of publishing fraudulent clickbait, fake news, the exact thing it claims to be waging a war against. Despite how much attention it received, Jacobs' Guardian article contained no original reporting, Greenwald writes. Indeed, it did nothing but purport to summarize the work of an actually diligent journalist, Stefania Marisi, of the Italian daily La Repubblica, who traveled to London and conducted the interview with Assange. Marisi's interview was conducted in English, and La Repubblica published the transcript online. Jacobs' work consisted of nothing other than purporting to rewrite the parts of that interview he wanted to highlight so that he and the government could receive the traffic for her work. Characterizing the piece as shoddy and misleading, Greenwald points out Jacobs' efforts to align Assange with Russian President Putin amount to wishful thinking, yet the insertion of that narrative purposefully implants in the reader's mind a damaging and wholly false narrative. There's about... I want to say 7 more parts to this article, and the whole thing is really worth reading. And I would recommend everybody read up on this, because the fake news, most of it's going to be put out by the mainstream because it's got an agenda, the Bilderberg Group,
Yeah, and the truth is, internet news has an agenda too, and, there's a lot of lies and deception out there, but there's nothing inherently less trustworthy about getting your news from an internet website than some sort of, than CNN or The Guardian. That was this one, right? The Guardian?
Yeah, that was The Guardian.
The Guardian's the one that misreported on Assange. It has to be deliberately. There's no way that that's accidental, right?
Well, no. I mean, if it was accidental, the guy wouldn't have said he was rephrasing things. They were clearly just trying to mince a story from another site. The fun part is that they probably got their traffic and then said, well, whoops, we won't do that
Yep.
again. But,
Yep.
like all of them will. They
Yeah.
don't, they're not paid to care.
Yeah, people are much more interested in reading the story that has the big headline that either affirms their assumptions or is entertaining than reading the one that is corrected or retracted. Even if you see that in an article, a lot of the time people will just assume that only, a minimal portion was edited for accuracy. It wasn't as if nearly every statement, and even the title of the article was misleading. And they just assume minor edits to the truth.
Yeah, and of course nobody will do anything. They'll just say congratulations because you were one of the few good guys, instead of saying, hey, maybe don't be a bad guy.
Yeah, maybe don't be a bad guy. It's crazy that people like that don't get fired. There isn't a lot more people getting fired for engaging in obvious lies. I guess it's not amazing because you have, wasn't sorry, this is related. Jeremiah might know. Wasn't 20 million allocated recently to give to some of the mainstream journalists by the government for news stories? Or
well, okay, so what was done was essentially the NDAA 2017 created a provision for essentially a ministry of truth, where they could decide which news outlets were publishing the truth and encourage them to publish more. So it's less that the money's going directly to them, and it's more that the money is going to censoring political opponents, because that's obviously what it'll inevitably be used for.
Yeah, the money that goes directly to them is more under the table by people behind the state, I would guess, or by CIA operatives in the mainstream media,
or funneled through Qatar with petrodollar deals.
Yeah, they funnel it through Qatar to Megyn
Qatar.
Kelly. Yeah, I said Qatar, and that's why we got screwed up on that one. Sorry, Qatar, Qatar.
Well, we're Americans.
Tough to spell. Yeah, spell it like the bug spray. Qatar. That's how I remember that stuff. Oh, let's see.
It's better than an emo.
Tell us. We got a little time. Tell us about the article you wrote.
Okay, well, I wrote this article
very local.
for the. Yeah, so I wrote an article because I was angry, and I just sort of hammered it out. No, California did not legalize child prostitution. It was like one of those headlines you read and you're like, no, and then you go in, and if you're a rational person, you're like, yeah, no, instead of saying,
right.
You know what, that sounds real.
What was the headline specifically?
California Democrats legalize child prostitution. And so,
what publication was it in?
Washington Examiner.
Okay.
Okay, I'll read the first little blurb from my shit here.
All right.
Okay, so, what's a New Year's weekend without a popular lie circling the internet? I ask because it doesn't appear we'll ever see a day like that again, especially with sensationalist partisan rags like the Washington Examiner producing partisan garbage like their most recent California Democrats legalized child prostitution. With cursory research, one finds that couldn't be much further from the truth. The article starts out with the line straight out of Fear-Mongering for Dummies and states, beginning on January 1st, prostitutions by minors will be legal in California. Yes, you read that right. Unfortunately, that's also wrong. And I go on to list the bill text.
Yeah.
And this essentially means the children would most likely be subject to protective custody rather than going to jail. This bill is relatively straightforward compared to many others. Protective custody is already a legal term, replete with legal requirements, well established in existing case law, so it's doubtful they'll change much, if any, of the way it's applied because of this particular bill. Protective custody probably means several things in this context, two possible approaches including children who came into prostitution voluntarily will be sent back to parents, and children who were abducted will also be sent back to parents, but with mental and or physical health screenings and care if need be. A case-by-case basis should be expected.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so that's on the Fifth Column News.
Yeah. Okay.
And the whole thing ends with me saying, a message to anyone reading this, let's do better in 2017. This kind of reporting is a direct product of what we encourage, and we can encourage much better content. Vote with your clicks and avoid sharing yellow journalism today. Focus your activism on areas where it matters and keep focused. Things like this only serve to tug at your heartstrings and only get funding and support when people don't look at them for the hack pieces they are. It's time to be the generation of truth. If we aren't, things can't get any better, and that actually is terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. I'm pretty hopeful that this 2016 election, I think, has done more to destroy the credibility in a single year of some of the mainstream news than has ever been done before. Not necessarily because they haven't lied this much before, but because they're more revealed because of so many people doing good work, revealing the truth on the web. People have access to more things, and the more they lose credibility, the more people will turn to the internet, and the more the cream of, the internet news websites and YouTube channels, the more that cream will rise to the top. And people, I believe most people, if you just ask them straight up, they want the news to tell them the truth. Now, they might not always act that way, but I believe that there's a huge market for honest journalism, and I believe that market has found a space where people can find it. So
and
I hope your 2017 thing happens.
Yeah, and the great thing is it's working, because somebody sent me a link to a Steven Crowder tweet of Louder with Crowder, and the Steven Crowder tweet says, "What? California legislature actually legalized child prostitution," and it's an article that let me check, but I'm assuming pretty much parrots the article that the Washington Examiner put out. And everybody in the comments is like, actually, you know what? No, it didn't, except a few people, and they're yeah, okay, so
yeah, because Crowder's like big time Republican, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
and he actually includes text from the bill.
Okay.
It looks like. Wait. Does it?
I don't know, man.
Oh, okay.
What do you think, YouTube? Does it?
No. No. And he pimps his new video at the bottom of it, ironically. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, it'd be interesting to have that conversation with him and see if he's willing to do a retraction. The Washington Examiner hasn't yet.
That's funny. Yeah, you got to wait till you get a few more hits, and then you do a retraction, like I said. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing we forgot, Jeremiah. What's the weather like in California right now? We didn't do our weekly weather report.
Well, let me see. I think right now it's hovering at around 50.
Okay.
And it should be hitting maybe 30, 25 by midnight.
Okay, I think it was teens today in Wisconsin. So we hope that information is helpful for you wherever you are and whenever you're listening. You're welcome. All right, man. Let's wrap this up. What else do you want to plug? Anything in particular other than @InsanityIsFree on Twitter, which you did up front?
Well, you can find me there. You can find me at various other places online, including Facebook, Minds, Gab, Allthing, everywhere. And please branch
Tumblr.
out.
Don't forget
just go
Tumblr,
with the mainstream
guys.
sites. Exact. That's Jeremiah Talks YT though.
Oh,
that's
okay.
a separate thing.
Okay. Not Insanity is Free, which is where you can find him most other places.
Yeah, because I actually do have Insanity is Free still, but it's really defunct. It's super defunct. So, but right now I have Jeremiah Talks YT, and it's a blog I'm about to start updating. Also, I have a Discord server if you wanted to chat directly.
All right. Sweet. Okay, one thing I want to say, if you are looking for us to talk about a topic, if you want us to, I'm becoming less and less interested in making ethical arguments for anarchism just because they are so damn easy to make. I mean, every argument for the state is just, this is why it's okay to murder people for exercising their basic human rights. I mean, those things fall apart when confronted with basic human ethics immediately. But if there's any sort of objections to anarchism you want us to deal with, or questions you have, or things you think are worth discussing that you want to hear about, you can contact us on Twitter at Chain Reaction, where the T is a 1. You can also email me at statesaresstupid@gmail.com, or do YouTube comment section. Just I'd throw that out there because we haven't yet. Don't worry, we still have plenty of things to talk about if you don't have anything. But like our audience to be pleased with our discussions. We'll probably end up having a debate at some point too with people. It might be nice to try to get the Liberty Hangout guys on here, or one of them, to actually have something that is fair. Not necessarily, not that it was unfair, but one-on-one, where it was more reasonably moderated than that
Interruptions are fun, though.
I guess. Yeah. You can follow me on Twitter at JeremiahJM. You can find me on Google Plus too, but I'm not on there very often anymore. Well, thanks a lot for listening, you guys. We really appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Hope you're doing well. Had a great Christmas and shit. If you're out there and you're an anarchist seeking to abolish the state, we really appreciate it. Keep working for it. You're some of the moral heroes of our generation. Until next time, free the markets and fuck the state.